Yeah. Is there a trick to it?
No, you put it up to your mouth and then you just keep on talking.
All right. Is it working?
Yeah.
Thank you all for coming, and we've had fun preparing for this, and I especially want to thank Mary for giving us a little kick to do this, and the Historical Society as a group for doing these things, because I've always loved hearing the stories that Mom and Dad have of the village and their times growing up, and their friends who they're still very dear friends with, and a lot of them are here tonight, and I know so well. And it's really a treasure for us to have done this and to have it recorded and have a record of that. So thank you to everyone who's done that. So let's start. Dad's going to start. I'm actually interviewing both Mom and Dad tonight, so they're going to both tell us some stories. So Dad, you moved here in 1935 when you were 3 years old, and can you just tell us a little bit about what brought you and your family here to Lakefield?
Certainly, I can tell you about how we got here. I think I'm blessed this evening. I see two gentlemen across from me that have been in this same seat before. I was at attendance with Keelan's, but I was not attendance with Dr. Sheeran, so I missed that one. We came from, Mother and Dad and myself came from Peterborough in 1935. I was 3. Dad had been operating a convenience store in Peterborough when the Avoca store in the village of Lakefield came for sale, and Frank Coyle was operating it at that time. And Frank, I think, decided to move into, am I too close or too far away? Too close? So anyhow, Frank decided to go into the garage business and hauling rock and all the wonderful things that he did through his life, and Dad made the deal with him and came on to Lakefield. Let me think now, what else? It was 1935, and what brought us here? Opportunity. Dad knew the business, and that's the other
Move it away.
One of the things that happened when he came, it was 1935, 3 years after the recession, and that was a big jump and a big investment for Dad. So he let Mother run the store, and he would run a bakery route to the stores in Peterborough, and then come back at the end of that run and do the physical work in the store after hours. So that's the way we started.
And you can tell us a little bit about where you lived when you first came here as well. There's an interesting piece about that.
The first place we moved into was 15 Queen Street, which is the building where the treasure chest and the beauty spot is. My office is upstairs in that particular building now, since I don't have mine in the supermarket any longer. I recall being put to bed, as I say, I was 3 when we came, and when I moved into that house.
They can't hear back there, Gord.
Can they not?
No.
Can? How is the...
I don't
Try
know.
it closer.
Try it closer? All right. Is that better?
Yeah. Ah.
Thank you. I'm glad Denise, that you mentioned that.
Trust me.
I recall, I'll watch it then, Cora. You can tell me when it's drifting. I recall after being put to bed, coming back down the front stairs and going on out and playing with some of the older boys on the street. And I think I was so much younger that I probably annoyed them more than anything else. I remember one evening behind Mr. Northey's store that 4 of the lads, each of them got one of my limbs, 2 hands and 2 feet, held me down, and the 5th one took a piece of wood off a wooden crate that was in the backyard there, and whomped me until they broke the stick. At that point, with my yelling, Mr. Northey came out and they all run. So that's one of the memories I have from back then.
Friendly village.
I have another one with Mr. Hendren, and this probably is a story that a few of you in the audience know, but I won't tell you why he he took me down to see my father, and Dad suggested he show me the inside of the local jail cell, which he did, incidentally. And so I think I learned a lesson there. I learned another lesson. As I recall, there was a chocolate bar returned, and it was sitting underneath the counter, and it sat there for a week or so, and I thought, well, I guess maybe that's not worth anything, so I could take it. So I left the store with this chocolate bar in my hand and sat out on the front steps of the post office. As I was about to take the first bite, I looked, and there was a little worm kind of look straight in the eye. So some good lessons very early in my life in the village.
So then you moved up to North Queen Street, I believe, and I think you have some stories about the Doubt Girls, a few of whom are here this evening, that you might like to share with us.
I didn't do it.
Yes, we moved from the location on 15 Queen, where the treasure chest is now. I moved to Regent Street for a short period of time, and at age 7 I moved to North Queen Street. And the Doubt House was right next to us at that point, which is known as Raydon. And I recall the baseball games we used to play in the front yards. But the girls were called in always a lot earlier than Brian and I that were participating in this ball game. So one evening I decided we weren't finished our conversation, so I climbed a tree that was adjacent to the veranda, and was up on the roof chatting with the girls through the window. But Rex didn't take too kindly of that, and the next day the tree was cut.
What window was that, Gord?
What year that
So Dad had a lot of freedom when he was a young boy, much more than my mom had. So Mom's going to tell us a little bit about her childhood now. And Mom, you were born here. Your family lived here from the time you were born, even before that. Mom's family was actually descended from the Boltons, the first Reeve, George Bolton. Apparently we're related. There are many of us here in Lakefield descended from the Boltons, so we've discovered. So can you tell us a little bit about your mom and dad?
Well, my dad was Earl Dixon Edwards. When he first came to Lakefield, Dad wore horn-rimmed glasses. And that old song, Barney Google, with the googly eyes, apparently was popular then. So Dad got the name of Barney, and I think that's what that's known as in the village. He did a lot of first haircuts for people. I am not used to these things, you can tell.
Is there a trick that we need? Is it something that we're doing over here? What's that?
A lot of first haircuts in the village, and a lot of the parents used to bring the pictures in of their sons having their first haircut. So we had quite a collection of those.
And when Gran was pregnant with you, you have an interesting little story about that as well.
Mom and Dad lived in a little house just in behind where Pearl Hendren lives now. And Mom fainted one day. And of course, Dad panicked. He thought she was dead. So he ran Dr. Smith was up over, Tanner's Drugstore then at that time. So he ran up and got Dr. Smith, and Dr. Smith come running back with him. And when they arrived at the house, we had a dog. And the dog, of course, had licked Mother's face. And she was sitting up as pert as could be when they came back in. So Dr. Smith proceeded to tell Dad the dog knew more than he did.
So you and Dad both went to school at both junior and high school at the old school on Ermitanger Street, which is no longer there. And you have a few stories about that, or at least one anyways, that maybe you can tell us about the chemistry.
Okay. When we were in grade 13, our homeroom was the chemistry lab, and Mr. Sutton was our chemistry teacher, and we were working with phosphorus. And he had to go away for a day, and we were warned within an inch of our lives not to touch that phosphorus while he wasn't in the room. But the boys decided they'd play around with it anyway. And we had a little bit of an accident, and some of the phosphorus got on one of the boys' pants, and needless to say, he made a pretty quick exit out of the room. And Mr. Sutton wasn't very happy the next day.
All right. How about just some general childhood memories, things that you did as a child? Do you want to share some of those with us?
I guess from the time I was maybe 7 or 8 until I was 16, I spent most of my summers in Detroit with my aunt and uncle. And I had a really good friend who lived just down the street. And Detroit was a pretty safe place then, so we pretty much had the run of the city. And we'd go visit other girls, have pajama parties, do all the girl things that everyone did. And the McLeans had a music room, and Janet played cornet, or Janice played cornet, Marjorie played the flute, and I played the piano. So Mrs. McLean used to arrange little
Soirees.
well, no, just little afternoon teas, and we'd have a little recital and play for all the ladies on the street. We used to have to go to the Y to swim. That wasn't very much fun. And when I was home, the Grahams had a cottage in the park, and I used to spend a lot of time over there. And I can remember sleeping in an open-air porch, and if it were cool, we'd be all snuggled down in the blankets. And I still remember the crows the next morning, and I don't think I ever hear a crow that I don't think about that little incident. And we had a cottage, my parents had a cottage on Stony Lake, and we spent a good deal of time up there in the summer. In the winter, basically, it was skating and sledding. We used to go to the top of the hill on Clemente Street by the fairgrounds, and we'd get a real good run from there right down to the highway. And then we used to go over onto Caroline Street, and I remember Mr. Bullock made a really neat bobsled for the girls, and we used to run from there, and we got a good run down there. So, there's so many memories I can't even begin to.
There was one about Bill Stabler and the train station.
Oh,
Watching the ride.
Oh yeah. In the winter, we'd come from school, and Mr. Stabler used to have a horse and sleigh, and the train station, there were still things coming in there, and he would pick them up there to deliver. And we'd run like everything to get from the school down to pick up the sled to get a ride with Mr. Stabler as far as the sleigh was going.
And Dad, you have a story about some chickens getting their heads cut off associated with this, I think.
The issue on the, with Mr. Stabler, he was a great guy. I spent many afternoons riding with him. On this one particular afternoon, I had been with him all afternoon, and when he got back to his home, which is right next to where Dr. Thompson is now, he found some of his chickens had their head removed. And when they started to look for the culprits, my name came up as the fellow that was responsible for that. Now, I won't tell you the names of the other two fellows that they caught, but they sure couldn't hang it on me. Now, I'm not saying that I was anything but a very fun-loving lad at that particular time. There's many stories of that, but I don't think it's in the notes to tell those right at this point.
And there was one more story that I thought was interesting about the old rink and where it was and something associated with that. I'll let Mom tell that one.
Yeah, there, the old rink, I think it was on Colburn Street, am I right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it used to be the skating rink on one side and the curling rink on the other side. And when we were in grade 8, Mr. Sloan decided that he would have a girls' hockey team. And that was a lot of fun.
What year?
Oh, goodness. When I was in grade 8, now you're going to make me think. It was quite a while ago. And I wasn't much of a hockey player, but we did have a lot of fun.
I just thought it was interesting that because girls hockey has been was such a big issue in my generation in the 70s as being this new thing. And I never heard this story until we started doing this. And lo and behold, we had a girls hockey team in Lakefield way back when. We'll get the date for you. So I know one of the things that the historians in particular were interested in was some of the businesses in the village. So Mom and Dad are going to do a little sort of walk down the memory lane of the main street when they were young. They've got some interesting stories about some of the businesses that were there, and of course a lot of them were friends' parents, and so they have little anecdotes to go along with those. So I'm going to pass the mic over. And this may be tricky, working back and forth with the mic, but we'll just do our best.
Okay. Yeah. Do you want to start that there?
I would believe the year would have been 46 if my mathematics is right.
Let's do it
Form
now.
a question there. I think probably we'll start at along the waterfront, which is it's got lots of history to it, and we'll start with the McManus sawmill that used to be up just almost behind the current arena and over towards the water. And next to that there was a lot of boathouses, small ones, and then a tower that they used to use to unload the nepheline off the barges and put it onto the box cars, and the train tracks came that far. Now I can take this quite a way. I'll take it down the water, and I'll let Donna take it down the main street. So basically, next to that was the public docks that are there now, of course, and what we used to call Brown's Boathouse, which is now Toth Marine. And tying in with some of the early pictures of the waterfront back there, and the Red Cross teaching the swimming and lifestyle and so on. That is exactly where that was done, was on just slightly right next door to the boathouse where Toth Marine operate now. And I believe from there down it was there's another boathouse at the next corner, almost across from your place, Margot, where you were. I think that was called Tate's Boathouse, if I'm not mistaken. As I remember diving off the roof there with some of the older guys again, as well as the tower, and testing the swim from the arena down across the river, down around the two islands and back up. I recall being pretty tired when we got back, but at that point, I guess I was hanging with some of the bigger boys that were more adept at that than I was, but anyhow, I'm going to pass the mic on to Donna and let her do the walk down the Main Street.
Yeah. You forgot to mention
She can't remember what it
I
was.
can't remember, the canoe factory, Gord,
Where was it?
We've got along
Gotta
this
be
well for all these
followed
years. Over 50 of us. The village, of course, had a great history for building boats, and the boat factory that we knew and that burned down in the mid-50s, I believe, was up where the bowling alley is now, and the chicken place,
Dixie Lee?
Dixie Lee Chicken.
Richie.
Right in, that's right, Paul Richet was involved in that. What is called Brown's Canoe was boat manufacturing. Where the beer store was another boat operation package there, and that whole area seemed to be a hub for boat building. And of course, I'll let Donna take the mic again and start our way down from there down along the Main Street, probably starting with the old Spence store.
the old Spence store, and then next door to it, where Lakefield Flowers is now, Kenny Remnant had a little restaurant in there, and I can still remember how great his French fries were. We used to stop and buy them in a little paper cup. The Royal Bank then, of course, was next door, and next door to that, Mr. Erskine had a hardware store, and it burnt down. And then I think after that, Mr. Hutt built a bowling alley in there, and that was a real boom to Lakefield. We thought that was just great, and we'd stop in every night, well, not every night, but lots of nights after school, and we learned to bowl. I'm sure Mr. Hutt must have had a few anxious moments with all us kids in there trying to learn how to bowl, but to my knowledge, no one ever did put a ball through the end of the bowling alley anyway. And then across the street from that was Grace Young's store. Kay Sturpin's in there now with Victorian Grapevine. Great.
Greg.
Oh, well, I go back a few years, Kay.
Okay, Greg.
You and I go back a few years.
And then there was a board fence, I believe, then between Young's store and the Porter store, or Mucker Hall.
A very short one there.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And Mucker Hall had a chap, Charlie Lake, used to bake, and he made these almond cookies. They were sort of an oval shape, and they were so good. I can still taste them. Then next door to that, the Websters had a furniture store, Mrs. Webster. And beside her, Molly Thompson had a little shop. It was called the Green Lantern Shop. She had a few gift things and wool and that kind of thing. And then next door to it was the Coronation Inn. Harry Wanamaker had that. And where the Chinese restaurant is now. And then next door to it was Red Wanamaker had a shoe store in there, and shoe repair. And then there was another board fence, wasn't there? Oh, the barber shop, Dave Miller's, yeah. Yeah, where Joe is now. And then there was the board fence. Okay, another board fence.
And the Chamber of Commerce building. shortly after.
Oh, was it in there then?
Across the road later.
No, it was there.
Where the board fence was.
Where the they took down the board fence. We're going way back to when they had the board, we love those board fences. And then next door to that, Mr. Northey had a drugstore. And I can remember calling in there when we were kids on our way back to school after lunch. And
The candy was $2.
Oh, no. Wasn't it the candy?
and we'd stop there, and Mr. Northey, we'd all line up, and he'd say, "Candy for a kiss." So we'd all line up and get him a kiss, and give him a kiss, and get a candy, and carry him on to school.
You never offered that to the boys.
It's $2 for you.
He sure could, Pete, sure is.
Oh dear, oh dear. And then beside Northey's, the $5 to $1, yeah, Jack Ryan operated that. And next door to that, I think, was Mr. Hutt had a pool hall, didn't he, in there?
Pool hall, way back, yes.
Yeah, and when he sold it, Wes Graham went in there with a menswear store. And then Mr. Redpath used to print the newspaper, the Lakefield paper in that building. Then next to him was Warren Payne's grocery store.
Miss Holland.
Miss Collins. Well, it was in there.
Collins first, then Warren. Warren was on the corner. Yeah.
The $5 to $1 store. Yeah. I knew I was going to miss somebody along
Well,
the
that's
way.
how you got all of us to,
Yeah. And then there was the butcher store, Teddy Crawford's, and
Board fence.
another board fence, yeah.
we don't have to get those anymore.
And then Gord's dad's store came next. And then Daddy Burgess had a drugstore where Carl Moore is now. And then the post office. And around the corner from the post office, Theodore Crawford had a store. He and his wife operated it. And then Hamlin's, it was frozen food. And lockers, yeah, locker
The
storage.
Crawford store became Mrs. Leonard's?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. And then across the road from that, Mr. Bullock had the blacksmith shop. And I had warts on my hands when I was a kid. And I remember they told me if I went in and soaked my hands in the water, you know, that he cooled the steel in, I guess, that'd get rid of the warts. Well, it didn't work. I ended up having to get them burnt off. But we sure had a lot of great visits with Mr. Bullock. And then across the bridges, there was a small grocery store just as you came off the bridges. It was Tiny Hills store, I remember then. And then we come back over.
I guess I'm going to do the other part of the main street, then we'll probably, the section where the village square is now didn't have, at the very bottom end, there was a lumber yard where PL is, or where Rona is now. Next to that, there was a little sash and door factory that Mr. Scriber operated, and it was residential up to the corner shop there that he was, he could
Fish and chip
bicycle.
shop now.
Yeah,
Big,
the chip
it's
shop.
a fish and chip store today, that's correct, but when I was a boy, it was Mr. Simpson's.
Seed shop.
Mr. Simpson's bicycle shop. Matter of fact, one of the thoughts on that particular building, I know when we purchased that, I think our first tenant was a fellow that painted some flowers on the outside in blue paint.
Was
It was in the early 60s. And I never really did find out what he sold. But it looked like flowers, and he didn't stay long. I think I asked him to leave. Anyhow, going across the street, and I hope this brings back some memories for a lot of you people that are here, in some of the things you remember as growing up in the village. Obviously, Leonard's Hardware that Sandy's dad ended up operating for many years was next door, and Ron Hall was right next door to that with his radio store.
Can I go back a wee bit?
Yes,
Mr. Simpson's bicycle shop, did it become Trude's Butcher Shop?
you're correct, it did, yes, yes, it did.
Was
Right.
in there, yeah.
Donna's touching me on the leg there and saying, you forgot one, so, because her dad, I think the first place he operated as a barber, independent barber in the village, was on the north side of Leonard's Hardware, that what later became the giftware side, what is now the Sunshine hairdressing section of that building, particular building. And I mentioned the next one as being Ron Hall's. Prior to that, I believe one of the Dunford boys, after coming back from the war, started the same business, the radio repair and this type of thing. I remember even prior to that, there was a chap in there that was tied in with I believe the research or the American Ethylene Mines, and he was there for a while, and he made. I know they made a pine oil for one thing, because my mother used some pine oil that she got from this gentleman in a steam bath that she had at that time. That was a great thing for your health, I believe. At least she thought it was. But then it was the hydro office, and
Was there a movie theater above your dad's barber shop?
not that I was aware of.
At some stage there was, and that's in the north half of the Leonard's building.
Are you speaking of downstairs or upstairs?
I think up. I'm
When
not
we were
certain.
kids, was there a movie theater there?
I don't know.
Now, Leanna remembers, she's older than me.
I think the lady in red at the end of the, or in orange rather, at the end of
Going home now.
at the end of the roll could fill you in on the movie theater there. She seems to remember it. I'll carry on along the street. Then next was where Alice Atkinson, bless her, used to work in the telephone office. She was there for years. And then next to that was Mr. Tanner's drugstore. And next to that was a funeral home at one time, and it's now a little restaurant in where the art shop is. Hendren's Funeral Home was there initially. I remember I believe a Dr. Moore was in that location, strangely, because in the house right next door to that, there was a Dr. Moore come into that location as well. That's where, yes, much later, that's where one of the real estate offices is now.
Right beside CIBC.
Now, next is the CIBC, but back then, Theo Down and his wife and their two children were at that location, Theo. Because I remember I bought that, Frank Coyle ended up with that house, and I bought it from Frank with the idea that we would get a parking lot on the front street. And I did everything but stand on my head with meetings with the other business people in town and the municipality itself to encourage them to do that. And I think I had something like $12,000 invested in the property at that time. But I got it turned down, and then the people from the CIBC came along and paid me $20,000 for it. So we didn't get the parking lot, but I tried anyway. I'm still trying on that same score, incidentally. Next to that then was at one time was Mr. Webster's, Mr. Hudson's. He had used furniture there, and when he went out of business, I believe the location was used as a parking lot for the Chamber of Commerce, or for the hotel. And I remember the chamber had a little information office right in the front corner of that. And Buddy O'Brien, for one, was one of the gals that operated out of there, and there was another lady from Young's Point was there for a while. Lori somebody, I can't recall her last name. Next to the commercial hotel was Village's plumbing store, and which is now the parking lot next to this hotel. The Villages then wound up that part of the street. No, they didn't. I'm sorry. The next building was, at one time, was furniture, and another time, Wally Thompson moved into the corner. The same corner was occupied by Keith Brown was in there. Arnie Graham was there with a shoe store just after the war. I remember the hearses used to be kept in the garage part that was adjacent to that main building. And then across the way where the post office is now, far back as my memory goes, there's a garage on that corner, right on the corner where the post office is, and then behind that was the creamery. And then behind that there was a small little building about the size of this room that Frank Payne started his insurance business in. It was right on the side street there. Doug Davis was just up the street on the corner where Coster has been, and the new chap Ellis is there now. As we go on up the street, I remember Herb Brown had a wonderful little lunch counter on the corner of Queen and Regent Street.
The ice cream parlor.
Yes, ice cream parlor. We used to go there for ice cream. She made the greatest pies. Matter of fact, they lived just down the street from there, and he used to grow the best looking celery I think I've ever seen in my life in his backyard, right next to the schoolyard. Brown's boathouse, or boat canoe, it's called Brown's Canoe right now. That was next, and I'm trying to remember what was going on, but I think there was boat building in there
It was
when I was a
Sailcraft
boy.
Company with George Cook.
Yeah,
Buddy
yes,
Cook
it
was
there
there.
for, yeah. That pretty much runs it up the street, as far as I can remember. I'm going to pass the mic back to Jen.
All right, so in the late 40s and early 50s, you guys were in your teenage years, and Dad, you were fairly involved in the music scene in Lakefield then, so tell us a little bit about what was popular in music in the late 40s and 50s and your involvement in that in the village.
Well, dance bands were popular because there was a dance hall on every piece of water around the country, and I think I played in them all. Bands were popular, brass bands were popular as well. I remember there was on the main park just opposite the IGA and behind the municipal hall, there was a bandstand there, and Mr. What was the gentleman's name that operated? No, can't remember the fellow's name that used to have a brass band in the village and played. Medill, yes, Mr. Medill was there. I got interested in music because my parents thought I should be interested in music, I guess, initially, and so they sent me to a lady up the street from us that was teaching Hawaiian guitar. I still remember learning 2 songs and giving that up and saying, I don't think this is for me. And then they sent me for piano lessons. That didn't work either. But when I entered high school, 2 things happened. Bob Sutton, the principal, was a musician, and he played in a dance band, and various dance bands. And he started a group of us in the hall, which was the old school where we had the public school on one side and the high school on the other side. And each of us had a very large hall that was used for assemblies and so on. That's where we a lot of the boys that went into music and are still with music in their lives started to learn the instruments.
The Knox brothers.
Knox brothers, yes, there was all kinds of them that were involved there. There was Herb and Greg and Johnny Peel and Charlie and myself and Jim Sloan, George Kelly, Johnny Deck, and several others that got their start in that hall in the old school. Say the dance halls were everywhere. We had one in the village down by the water, by the docks rather, where the docks that is closed right now. There was one in Peterborough. They were on Camelford and Hastings and Trent River and Crow's Landing and just about everywhere around where there was a big enough hall, it became a dance hall. And that's what people did on Friday and Saturday nights, and I spent most of those Friday and Saturday nights with some of the boys that I mentioned that were in the orchestra. We had cadets back in high school as well, and the first day out for cadets, they wanted to know if they could get some volunteers for the bugle band, so I stepped out and learned how to play a bugle. We didn't have anybody to teach us, we were just given a horn. And believe it or not, myself and another chap that was living just up on North Queen Street, we both went down to the water, just down in behind Raydon and behind that general area of the village, and from there we would learn how to blow that instrument and finally form the notes. Some very super interesting ideas there. That's my music background. Sports. I played football through high school and on into first year college. I played a bit of hockey. I didn't have many years in hockey, and one game, Red Wasson was in goal, and he got hurt. And they wanted somebody to take his position. So I stepped to the plate. Red stood behind me, behind the net, and guided me through that procedure. And we're talking about back in the days when you didn't have good padding, you didn't have any mask, and there was always a nice gap between the end of the pads that covered your legs and the pants you wore. Of course, the football was much the same way because the helmets were soft, like the old kind that they used to use. Used to see the pilots, the fellas flying the open cockpit planes and the scarf flying and the soft hat. Well, that's the football hats back in my time. I probably covered enough of their peasants back then.
Well, the only other thing you were going to talk about maybe was some cars. I think you had.
That can be brief.
I guess my fondest memory in cars is I started at age 16, and I gave my dad my $200 worth of war savings certificates and a couple of war bonds that I had purchased. I think the war stamps were 25 cents a piece, and I remember I used to sell them at the school and give the kids a pencil if they bought $1 worth. And so I assembled quite a few of those, and at age 16 or 15 I purchased a 27 Essex. But the car that I really liked the most was the 41 Packard convertible that I bought from Ross Calgary. And I had that during my courting years and in my late high school years. It was yellow, and it was pretty, and
Won her over.
And fast.
That was the best one.
Okay, Mom's got a couple stories about her teenage years and the things that she did while Dad was busy making music. So, Mom, I know you used to camp in the park. Maybe you can tell us about that, because it was a little different than it is now.
It was. There were the cottages in the park, and from the end of the cottages to the point, it was pretty much all natural. It was trees and not much else, and the road that went up around the corner. And they used to have wood platforms set up over there so that if you went camping, you had a base to pitch your tent on. And one summer, Ann Samus and Ruth Graham and I decided we were going to go over to the park and pitch a tent and stay there for a while. And I don't know how Ann and I ever got involved in that, because we were both so afraid of the dark that we wouldn't go anywhere alone at night. But anyway, we did get the tent pitched and spent a while there, and we thought we were so grown up.
What age would you have been then?
Oh, probably 15,
Oh,
16.
okay,
Were we younger than that? 13, 14?
okay, wonderful.
Anyway, we had a grand time anyway, and as I say, we thought we were so brave, but we come to find out later, Ann's dad, Mr. Samus, was the policeman in the village at the time, and he spent most night driving around the park a half a dozen times just to make sure we were all right.
No boys around.
Wonderful. Oh, that's gorgeous.
And Mom, you worked at Papa Blake's store, so,
Yeah.
which was very different than stores are now. So can you tell us a little bit about that, just how that worked? Yeah.
They sure weren't like it sure wasn't like the supermarkets are today. It was just a general store, and there was a lot of bulk product that was sold in the stores then, and you served the customers. They came in and they told you what they wanted, and you'd run and get it and bring it back to them, and then the next thing, and you'd run and get it and bring it back for them. And people used to call their orders in, so you'd take their orders over the phone and then make them up at the back of the store. And there was one section at the back where we used to do that. And Gord's grandfather was the butcher, and back then chickens didn't come packaged like they do today. They had to be drawn, as they and I still remember Papa, I swear he waited until I got back in there assembling an order, and he'd draw a chicken. And then he had a string that used to hang, and he'd light it to take the odor of the chicken away. Well, I don't know what was worse, but I made some quick retreats out of there, I'll tell you. And one day I remember a gentleman came in, and I asked him what I could get for him, and he said, "I'd like a pack of plates, please." And I said, "Excuse me?" And again he says, "Pack of plates, please." And about the third time around, I was beginning to wonder how I was going to handle this. I got this pack of plates again, and Mr. Blake came around the corner of the counter, thank goodness, and he said, "Donna, he would like a pack of potatoes."
I remember walking in there.
Yeah,
And the
yeah.
appliance store next to the post office.
Yeah, well, that was a part of Gord's dad's store. He had appliances.
Yeah, yeah. He had two
Yeah,
carts
that's
to that
before
store.
we went to yeah.
I remember that.
All right.
Does anybody still know what a peck is?
A pack, yeah.
16 pounds.
16 pounds, there you
As I
go,
recall,
for
it
the
was
record.
16 pounds.
A half a
Back
bushel.
in the days,
Half a
pack.
bushel.
Could be, we didn't sell much by the bushel. Another bushel.
Sold by the pack. And Mama, I remember you talking a lot about Teen Town.
Oh
So,
my God.
well, let's hear about Teen Town.
Okay, we had teen down every Saturday night, and we'd all get together, and it was held upstairs in the town hall.
Memorial?
Memorial Hall. And we'd all get in there, the boys would all line up on one side, and the girls would all line up on the other side. And we'd sit there and look at one another. And finally, some of the boys got brave enough to come over and ask some of the girls to dance. And it took a little while, but through the evening we did manage to get together, and we did have a good time. It was a lot of fun.
Do you remember who was responsible for running those?
No.
No.
Yes, you
But I
do.
know our parents used to come and chaperone, would take turns.
Darcy Windsor.
Darcy with
Okay. Yeah, Darcy was.
He wasn't from Lakefield. He owned the chicken farm.
Thought he had the
That's
cleaning
sick.
business.
I think Dee might have some more interesting
No.
stories.
We'll get her next.
We had to
Yeah.
get dictionaries over there.
Darcy Windsor, did he not have a cleaning business in town?
No.
Different Windsor.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
let's move on. Let's move on to how you and Dad met. It wasn't a teen town.
No, it wasn't at Teen Town.
Yeah, the convertible.
No, it wasn't that either.
Slower transportation.
It was our
Should have been.
United Church Young Peoples. We had a hayride and went down the river road. And Gord managed to get sitting beside me that night and asked me if he could walk me home, and the rest is history.
How old were you?
Oh,
Don't remember.
I must have been 17, I
17,
guess. Yeah.
That makes sense.
All right, and now I've lost my place. I'm skipping ahead here.
Yeah.
Oh, I really lost my place. Oh, here we are. So then after you graduated from school, just tell us a little bit about what you went on to do, and then we'll ask Dad a little bit about his teen years.
After I graduated, I went into nursing, and that wasn't for me, so I left there, and then I went and into the bank, Montreal and Peterborough.
Nichols or St. Joseph's?
No, Civic.
Nichols.
Civic.
Civic.
Yeah.
Was Civic then?
Ooh,
Yeah.
younger than I thought.
Okay. So that's what I did.
Oh, I guess we already did Dad's. We're not gonna do Dad's teenage years. We already did Dad's teenage years. So Dad, tell us about your path after high school.
I think the final year in high school, I decided it was a good idea to take some cars out west because they were worth considerably more out there than they were here. So I bought a couple of 1951 Pontiac coaches that had a few miles on them, demos. I bought one from Frank Gold. He comes back into my life once again. And the other one from a dealer in Peterborough. And I had contacted a chap named Pearson that operated a car lot out in Edmonton called Honest John's, and he quoted me around $2,900 a piece for these vehicles, and I was buying them at around $2,000, so I thought that sounds like a good deal. And a couple of my friends decided they would like to come along with me. One was John Pugh, and John is back in town now, but he stayed there for many, many years out west and never did come back, or he did come back to see his family, but he made that his home through most of his adult life. Gib Hunter was another one that was with me on that trip. Something was supposed to last about a week, ended up to be about 6 weeks out there, and I finally did sell them down in a little town south of Edmonton. I think it was called Wetaskiwin. And Royal Bank was right across the corner, so I could transfer the money back real quick, so Father wouldn't get too uptight. And I had enough left over to buy a motorcycle, and I was about to head out the next morning for back home. However, that particular evening, a call came through from my dad that my grandfather had just been taken into the hospital. So I sold the motorcycle to John Q that night and boarded the midnight prop plane and arrived in Toronto the next morning. Unfortunately, I was about an hour late to see my grandfather alive. By the time I reached home and then drove to Lindsay where he was, he had just passed on. So, but that was part of my thing. The first thing I did just while in high school. I had some notes, but I lost them, but that's all right. I went on to, that was the summer of graduation. The first year after high school, I went to Waterloo College to take pre-meds. After following that year, then I decided I wasn't going to be a doctor after all. And I came back and went into business with my dad in the grocery store.
What year are we talking now, Gord?
We're talking 53, 52, 53.
Of course, Mum was back here, right? Waterloo was a long way away. So you and Mum were married then in 1954, and it's still sort of classic to do wedding pranks. So tell us about one of the pranks that happened at your wedding. Do you want to tell this one?
Okay. Ruth's husband, Jerry Stock, was a mechanic, and Jerry somehow hooked the brakes up to the horn, and all the way from the reception back to the house, through the village, every time we put the brakes on, the horn would go off. And we had no idea what was making this happen. And when we got back to the house, Jerry and some of the guys were standing and laughing like everything, so we knew who was responsible for that little trick. But we did get that disconnected before we took off on our honeymoon anyway.
All right. So, and then of course you had two beautiful children. And actually, let's move on maybe to the years in business, and Dad, you can tell everyone a little bit about that. My brother was born in '57. IGA, they went IGA at the old store in 1958. I was born in 1959, and they opened the new store at its current location in 1960. So busy time. At one point, we were considering moving to Bancroft. So tell everyone about that and how we ended up staying here in Lakefield.
By 1963, I had purchased the Bancroft IGA. The chap there he was ill and was in coma, so the business was for sale. And back then it was quite easy, once you had proven yourself in the food industry, that the wholesale would back you. So I think in that particular case I got my backing dollars from the Royal Bank, but they were quite anxious to back anybody that they felt could handle the job and do it well. So 63 to 75 I had Bancroft, and by 66 Dad was considerably improved in his health, and the two of us bought the Camelford IGA together. During the 60s and 70s, we started to move on to the village square. During 1960, we had we opened our new store in where it is, the present location. And during the 60s, the houses along the street, one after another, became available. And I purchased those, and Bev Graham was my chief head guy to do the alterations, and we didn't have architects and planners at that point. Donna had an excellent flair for color and putting things together, and I was able to make sure it happened. And Bev was the man that could make it work. He did it. But I draw a concept of where how the layout was going to be on a piece of board or a piece of wall as we'd be talking in the house. But I'd come back later on the day or the next day to check on progress, and that was gone. But he knew what I wanted and how it was to go together, and we went ahead and did it. And that was a very different way the way things are done today. But that's the way that kind of worked on it, and we went, one place after the other along the village until we created the present village square as it exists now, really. And I don't think we've had too many changes none in the structural layout of the buildings. The idea, of course, was to create some parking. Parking was not good down there, and if we're going to grow, we needed parking. So the only way to get it was to buy houses, take them down. We moved two houses and a couple of garages, and the rest were retained and created the parking lot that exists today. So that was part of that. That was the way that got started in McCurry.
So we missed the part about why we didn't move to Bancroft.
We didn't want to go.
We love Lakefield
Well,
too much.
I ain't perfect, I know that. We didn't get to Bancroft. As I say, Dad's health improved, his health deteriorated at that particular point when I purchased the Bancroft IGA, and so I located through the wholesaler a competent individual that had been used to running supermarkets and chain store supermarkets, and sent him on up to Bancroft to look after my investment and hopefully may be able to make the mortgage payments to the chap that I had purchased from and to the bank, and that worked out okay. So I was in 63, I believe, and it was 1975 when I sold my interest in that to Jerry Howarth, who had been working with us in Lakefield for quite a few years. And probably a lot of you here that are here tonight maybe remember Jerry when he was in Lakefield.
All right, so there was a period there in 1968, I think, for about 7 years, where you and Dad were quite involved with the church, United Church Young People's Group, the place where they met. They returned and became the chaperones, or the guides or the leaders of that, and it was quite unusual being in the 60s and 70s. So do you want to talk a little bit about that in those years?
Okay, we started with the United Church Young People's. Gordon Valentine approached Gord and I to see if we'd be interested in taking this on, and we did, and we worked with just our own little young peoples for a while, and then pretty soon some of the other kids started to question. They didn't have a young peoples at their church, and could they join us? And so we said yes, we would go with it, but we didn't know, how the other churches might feel about it. So Gordon went and checked with the other ministers and with the priest, and they said yes, that was fine. So we ended up with an interdenominational group at that time, and we decided we couldn't call it the United Church Young Peoples anymore. So the kids came up with a new name, and they called it the Group, and they spelled it G-R-U-P-E. We had a great time with that bunch of kids. We had all kinds of potluck suppers, I remember, and one of the young chaps, he brought a beet salad to every potluck dinner that we ever had, and no one ever ate it, but he kept on bringing it every time. And played great piano, yeah. And We used to have barbecues at the cottage, and yeah, a lot of music. There were a lot of really good kids, and we put on a young people's service on a Sunday night, and that really went over well. Everyone really enjoyed that. But then it was time for us to leave, and I guess when we did, we had maybe 40 or 50 kids coming out to our group. It was so much fun.
It was great, except they quit before I got old enough that I could go.
I didn't want you.
But I had all these older sibling-like people that I'm still very close to, so it's like I have 40 or 50, older brothers and sisters. So, all right. Let's move on then. I guess, Dad, once the square was established, for you continue to focus on the store, enlarging it several times over the years. Do you want to talk a little bit about the renovations, or just about what your favorite part was about working at the store? Because that was a big part of your life.
Well, when you're in the kind of situation that I was fortunate enough to be in, the business became a very important part of the family life too. My wife worked in the business, my daughter worked in the business, my son worked in the business. It was really a family situation. Through the years, there were many additions. The first section was 45 by 125, and we built that in 1960. By 63, we added a piece on the end, and through the years, we added 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I think there were 5 more additions went on through those years until it reached a size of about 22,000 square feet in latter years. Those were great years, and I think what I enjoyed the most there was the way I was able to work with the staff. I often had as much as I could look back 4 generations with some of the people that worked for me in latter years, where I had delivered groceries to their grandparents or their great-grandparents. And I think the other thing that was important to me and that I cherish was the contact and the knowledge I had of the customers and their life, because they tell you about their kids and what they were doing and their sicknesses as well, and you knew what they bought, and you made sure you had that special spice or that special item that was theirs and the sizes that they wanted and needed. The business has changed many times now, and the wholesalers are more in control of what the dealer can actually even get. But when I was involved in the business, and particularly in the early years, you could get anything you wanted, and it was easy, and it was that's the way you set your store up, and that's what you did. You knew what your people wanted, what your customers wanted, what sizes were right. We had three. What am I trying to get across here? We would have 3 types of canned goods. There would be standard quality, choice quality, and fancy quality. And there'd be different sizes, so. But that's getting down to the nuts and bolts of the business itself. But basically, those are some of the things that were particularly important to me. So, knowing the customers and being able to work closely with the staff was the most important to me.
You had a very loyal staff.
Yes, some of them for over 30 years.
And customers.
And friends and families. Yeah.
Good memories, good memories.
So, of course, there were many, many other things over the years that you and Mom were involved in. we managed to get them to put a few of their little awards and things up over here. Mom and Dad don't like to brag too much, so. So, but I think the big thing is, as Dad said, is it's the years that they had in business and the people that were involved. And I know as their daughter growing up, everyone, all the people that we worked with, that worked with us, were as much a part of our home life as they were our work life. I remember many of them popping in for coffee, coming for dinner, and you know, customers and friends, and the house was always open. Mom was an amazing cook. She still is.
And a great Sunday school teacher.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
I thought she was
She was a
a
Sunday school teacher too. A spiffy dresser.
And then I was in the group for a year.
That's
and
right.
I thought, what laid back parents you had. And parents like that.
They were good parents. Yeah. A lot of love, a lot of laughter. Our home was always open, and I'm certainly grateful for all that I've been given through the years. So, do you guys have anything else that you want to add at this point, or?
I just really want to thank all you people for coming and listening to this old couple ramble on about what we've been doing through the years. We had a lot of fun doing it, and I do appreciate the audience that's here and so many faces. I think I know every one of you. Thanks for coming. I do appreciate it.
Anytime.
Apparently we have a question. Are you
Is
guys
there
up for a
any
question?
Question?
Is it time for questions, David?
Yeah, I enjoyed it very much, and from your story about downtown Lakefield, I've only been here about 5 years, 3 years full-time actually. It sounds to me like it was much more prosperous back then, that you wouldn't have to go anywhere because you had so many different businesses in town. Mr. Blake, how do you see, like, why did things change? And I know that we're always working on improving the business economy in Lakefield. I know that much in my short history here. So, I mean, what would you say will be the future for Lakefield? And like, why did it change, and what do you see as the future?
Well, that's a pretty loaded question. I think everything has changed through the number of years. We're going back, was 70 years ago that we came to this village, and I was 3 at that point. So that amount of time in the last 70 years, almost everything that we know is not like it was back a few years ago even. When I started, I was earning 25 cents an hour. When I was married, I was earning $25 a week. And we were able to live and do things on that kind of earnings. When I went to buy something, you could buy a house for a couple $1,000s. So things were quite different. The major difference was in the way prices have gone up and the way wages have gone up. Opportunities are still there. I'm still seeing them every day, and I have people coming to me with an idea or an option, something that they want me to either talk to them about or do something with them. But where I see it going, well, I hope it continues to inspire people to go into business and analyze what is working and what isn't working, look at who's succeeding and why. And I think with that kind of an attitude, you can succeed in any generation. You know, 20, 50 years from now, as things change, you'll have to change with it, or people will change with it. But the same opportunities and the same principles of doing business or life, raising your family, your respect for your spouse, they're all the same. Those things make it work. Doesn't matter whether it's life, love, or business. Is there any more questions?
Who's gonna start a shoe store? It's about the only thing we haven't done.
We did have one for a while.
No,
Joyce?
Mr. Wanamaker.
And Joyce. Joyce. Recently.
Maybe she was women's shoes.
No.
No? Okay. I missed her.
And
Donna and Gord, you have given us a most interesting evening, and thank you for leading this tonight, Jan. You've done very well. Two wonderful people to lead along the way. Donna and Gord, you have been such an asset to the village of Lakefield. You have enriched our community and definitely are wonderful ambassadors of the community and have made it Lakefield, the special place that we all come to love. You put your heart and soul into the village. You've been wonderful role models, and we're all so grateful that you didn't move to Bancroft.
me too.
Thank you. When I was a little girl growing up, I lived in the treasure chest. Half of it my grandparents lived in, and I lived in the other side. And when my father had the hardware store, I would taunt my mother because she told me never to cross the street, so I would stand right at the corner by Mr. Simpson's store and stick my wee toe over the edge and look. And as I would do that, then as I grew up in public school, of course we didn't have a television, but you went to the drugstore and you looked at all the teen magazines and the movie stars. And my idea of movie stars when I was growing up was this cute couple in Lakefield. She was this cute blonde little girl dating this cute dark-eyed, twinkly-eyed guy, and I thought, they are movie stars. And when they got married and I saw them going along that street, I thought, wow, this is the best ever. You were the cutest, sweetest couple back then, and you still are. You are just a wonderful couple.
I think you have to get one last one.